Some cars are remembered because they were fast, others because they were beautiful, but a rare few are remembered because they were built like a stubborn argument. If your dad drove one of these in the 1980s, there's a good chance he still talks about it. That strange Swedish car with the ignition between the seats. The one with the shape that looked unlike anything else on the road. The one he swears was ahead of its time. And for once, he's not exaggerating. Because the Saab 900 wasn't just quirky, it was a preview. A preview of where the entire automotive industry would go decades later. Not because Saab tried to be cool, but because Saab came from a world where good enough was not a philosophy. Saab built airplanes. And when airplane engineers look at cars, they don't see style first. They see structure, they see airflow, they see failure modes. They see the moment something goes wrong, and they build as if that moment is guaranteed to happen. That mindset produced one of the most over-engineered, unconventional, quietly revolutionary cars ever sold to normal people. This is the story of the Saab 99 and the Saab 900, an aircraft manufacturer's answer to automotive design. And the deeper you go, the more you realize this wasn't a car built to follow rules. It was built by people who thought the rules were wrong. Let's rewind. In the late 1940s, Saab was known for aircraft, serious aircraft, military-grade thinking. Then in 1947, Saab decided to build a car. Imagine the confidence it takes to enter the automotive industry and casually believe you can improve it. Their first car was the Saab 92. And from the beginning, it was different in a way that wasn't about fashion. The body approach wasn't a bunch of stamped panels bolted together. It was more like an aircraft fuselage, one continuous shell idea, built with the mindset of strength and airflow. Early Saab engines were odd too, 2 strokes, then a 2-stroke triple, then later, a V4 that was basically a creative slice of someone else's engineering. And here's the part that tells you how Saab thought. They didn't chase constant reinvention. They evolved the same platform relentlessly. For decades, Saab built variations of the same fundamental car, improving it step by step, refining the idea instead of constantly replacing it. Then, about halfway through that long run, Saab introduced only their second truly new car. Not their 10th model, not their 20th, their second. The Saab 99 in 1967. This car became the foundation for almost everything Saab would build for the next quarter century. And to understand why it mattered, you need to understand one critical fact. The 99 wasn't designed by traditional car people. It was designed by airplane people. And airplane people think about crashes differently. In the 1960s, many car manufacturers still treated crashes like unpredictable disasters, events you hoped would not happen, and if they did, you hoped the car held together long enough for help to arrive. Saab approached it like aviation. In aviation, you don't hope the structure survives. You design where the forces go. That concept has a name: load paths. A load path is a deliberate structural channel that guides impact forces through a vehicle in a controlled, predictable way. Instead of random collapse, you create a planned route for energy to travel, away from the occupants. Saab applied that thinking to a family car. They reinforced the structure with serious intent. A key reinforcement ran from high in the A-pillar down into the chassis, designed specifically to protect occupants in rollovers. And Saab didn't just talk about it. They tested it in ways that felt almost absurd for the era. They dropped the car from height. They documented what happened. And then they improved it again. The 99 ended up significantly stiffer than many competitors. That stiffness obviously helped in crashes, but it also created something drivers didn't expect: quality. A stiff body doesn't flex and twist as much, so the doors close with a deep, solid sound instead of a cheap clang. The dashboard doesn't squeak like a loose shelf. The car feels unified. And because the structure is solid, the suspension can do its job properly. Handling becomes more precise. Steering feels more honest. Comfort improves because the chassis isn't shaking itself apart. All of that came from a simple Saab idea. If you're going to build a structure, build it properly. Then came the firsts. Not marketing gimmicks. Real firsts that later became normal. Saab integrated side impact protection into doors, reinforcement designed to handle T-bone impacts before most manufacturers treated that as a priority. Saab added headlight wipers because Sweden is a place where winter doesn't care about your visibility. If your headlights get covered in slush, you're not just annoyed, you're blind. Saab designed doors that overlapped the sill, so your pants didn't get smeared with winter grime every time you stepped out. It sounds small until you realize how human it is. This wasn't engineering for headlines, it was engineering for real life. They introduced seat heating early because cold leather in winter is punishment. They worked on cabin filtration decades before most drivers cared what they were breathing. They studied airflow with the seriousness of aviation. Saab spent time in wind tunnels, shaping the rear profile to manage turbulence. That unusual rear contour wasn't a designer trying to look unique. It was airflow logic made visible. And Saab even paid attention underneath. Smoother surfaces, aerodynamic thinking, efficiency that most family cars of the era didn't bother to chase. These were aircraft engineers. They didn't know you weren't supposed to wind tunnel test a practical car in the late 60s. So they just did it. But now here's something fascinating. Saab wasn't only engineering a car. They were engineering an identity. There's an old, famous observation from the early 70s, a strange correlation between Saab ownership and university academics. It became almost a cultural joke, Saab drivers as thoughtful outsiders, people who wanted something safe and practical, but refused to drive something boring. And that takes us to the moment Saab predicted the future more clearly than almost anyone else. Turbocharging. In 1978, Saab turbocharged the 99. Now, turbocharged cars existed before, but Saab's approach wasn't about building a wild sports car. Saab's question was different. How do we keep the efficiency of a small engine, but give it the effortless pull of a bigger one? That single question describes modern engine design. Don't add cylinders. Don't make the engine huge. Keep the engine compact and efficient, and use boost when you need extra torque. That's your modern 2-liter turbo philosophy. The idea that a normal daily car can feel strong without being wasteful all the time. Saab put that logic into production when most of the industry wasn't thinking that way yet. And then came the Saab 900, the car people remember. From the driver's seat backward, the early 900 was closely related to what came before. Saab didn't change what already worked. But the front was revised for evolving regulations and structural priorities, and the overall packaging became even more Saab. And then you meet one of the strangest engine layouts in mainstream automotive history. The 900 is front-wheel drive. But the engine sits longitudinally, front to back, like it belongs in a rear-wheel drive car. And it sits very far forward, largely in front of the front axle. Then Saab made it weirder. They rotated the engine and leaned it. That odd slant angle wasn't random. It came from an earlier engine lineage tied to a V8 concept, cut in half to become a slant 4 geometry. And the transmission connection involved a chain drive. A chain. The result was a car that could be surprisingly serviceable in some ways, and frustrating in others. Some jobs were easier than you'd expect. Other jobs felt like Saab engineers were daring mechanics to stay loyal. Exhaust routing, for example, became its own kind of drama. The path the exhaust had to travel, forward into the turbo area, then turning back, created tight clearances and heat management challenges. This is where Saab's reputation for maintenance-minded owners comes from. These cars rewarded attention, and they punished neglect. But the real genius of Saab turbocharging wasn't the turbo itself. It was the control. Saab developed a system that monitored engine knock and responded intelligently. Knock is dangerous, premature combustion driven by heat and pressure. Turbo engines are prone to it because compressing air raises temperature. Many turbo cars of the era dealt with knock by running very low compression ratios. Lower compression gives you more safety margin under boost, but it also sacrifices efficiency and response when you're not in boost. Saab wanted both. They wanted high compression for good normal driving efficiency and turbo boost for power, without destroying the engine. So Saab built a system that detected knock and reduced boost automatically. That meant the car could run on lower quality fuel if needed. It would simply make less power. Give it better fuel, and the system could allow more performance. That's modern thinking. Real engine management, decades early. And Saab's boost behavior was tuned for real-world torque, not dramatic peak horsepower. The headline horsepower difference might look modest, but the way the car pulled at everyday speeds felt completely different. The kind of quiet quickness that makes a car feel strong in normal driving, where you actually live. And perhaps most importantly, it didn't feel dead before the turbo woke up, because high compression helped response. This is the core blueprint of modern turbo engines. Small displacement for efficiency. High compression for response. Managed boost to prevent knock. Torque where you actually drive, not just power at the top of the rev range. Saab did it early and did it with intention. Inside the cabin, the aircraft thinking continued. The dashboard was designed around the driver like a cockpit. Controls placed where your eyes naturally go. Things you use often, closer to your line of sight. Less hunting, less distraction. Even small layout decisions felt forward-thinking, like placing audio controls higher where they could be adjusted with a glance, rather than buried low. Then there were details that made Saab feel like Saab. The parking brake design choice influenced by weight distribution logic. The ignition placement between the seats, low and out of the knee zone, because in a crash, hard objects near your body are hazards. Even the reverse gear requirement for key removal wasn't just quirk. It served multiple purposes: stability habits, winter practicality, preventing rollaway mistakes. Again, this is aircraft thinking. Where will the body move in an impact? Don't place hard objects where the body will go. Now here's the question most people ask. How could a platform rooted in 1967 still feel competitive decades later? Because the fundamentals were so right that the design aged unusually well. Saab refined and improved, but the core concept, rigidity, safety structure, driver-focused ergonomics, real-world turbo philosophy, kept the car relevant, and the market responded. Saab reported long streaks of consistent sales growth in the early to mid-1980s on a platform whose roots were already old. That doesn't happen to normal cars. Normal cars peak, then fade. Newer designs arrive. The old model becomes invisible. But the 900 kept finding buyers because it offered something rare, intelligence with personality. An automotive journalist once described the 900 Turbo as a respectable, solid citizen with a strange streak of rebellion. A car you could drive responsibly with your family and still feel like you were driving something special. And that's the true identity of the Saab 900. It wasn't a sports car pretending to be practical. It wasn't a practical car pretending to be sporty. It was its own category: thoughtful, safe, efficient, unconventional, and quietly quick. Saab questioned assumptions. Should safety be optional? Saab said no and engineered structure deliberately. Should efficiency mean slow? Saab said no and pioneered practical turbo torque. Should handling require harshness? Saab said no and built stiffness into the foundation. Should the driver adapt to the car? Saab said no and made the car adapt to the driver. Not every Saab decision was painless. Some created maintenance headaches. Some were overcomplicated. But the philosophy was consistent. Start with what people truly need and engineer backward from there. That mindset is why people sometimes compare Saab to modern disruptors. Not because Saab built electric cars, but because Saab came from outside the usual car culture and refused to accept the industry's default assumptions. One company asked why cars couldn't behave more like computers. Saab asked why cars couldn't be engineered more like aircraft. Different origin, similar rebellious mindset. Saab's story eventually ended, not because the ideas were weak, but because industries are not always kind to outsiders. Ownership changes, corporate pressure, economic crises. But the ideas Saab introduced didn't die. Side impact beams became normal. Load path thinking became standard. Turbo philosophy became mainstream. Heated seats became expected. Cabin filtration became routine. Driver-focused cockpit design became a goal across the industry. And here's the most surprising part. The Saab 900 is not a myth you can only admire from behind glass. You can still buy one. They made enough that survivors exist. Many still run. And as more people rediscover what made them special, values have started to climb, though they remain within reach compared to the truly unattainable legends. But there is a trade-off. Owning an unconventional car sometimes means maintaining it with unconventional respect. The layout, the packaging, the quirks that served a purpose. You can choose a car that follows every standard rule and behaves like every other car. Or you can choose a car built by aircraft engineers who believed the rules were wrong. The Saab 900 was built for the people who chose the second option. And that's why, decades later, it still feels like a preview of the future. Not because it tried to predict the world, but because it refused to accept the world as it was. Subscribe. More timeless legends are coming next.